Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to the Prophecy Roundtable. I'm your host, Dr. Douglas Hamp. Scott Harwell is with me. We are taking an interesting topic today, which is Armageddon. Where will it take place? All right, that's our big question. Now, before I get into that, I want to let you know that we are going to Israel in April 2024, and you should go. All right. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a great trip. If you've never been, you're going to love it. It's going to blow your mind. So, all that stuff. You should go to thewaycongregation.com for more information on that. It says Israel trip. Just click on that button. We've kept it really affordable. It's going to be an 11-day trip. It'll be phenomenal. You can come from anywhere in the world and join us. So you don't have to start in Colorado. You can just, fly there and we'll meet and have a wonderful time. So we look forward to you guys joining us with that. Also, if you want to sponsor or be a patron of this program, you can go to patreon.com/Doug Hamp. You can give as little as $2 a month or, whatever, 20, 200. It's up to you. There's no limit, but that's of course up to you. So thank you. Big shout out to all the patrons. So anyway, without further ado, of course, here's my wonderful co-host, Scott, who's been really roughing it lately. Golfing and fishing. I'm really sorry for you, Scott. It's
been a tough 7 or 8 days.
Yeah, well, everyone has to suffer occasionally. So, all right. So Armageddon. This is a really interesting topic. We have in Revelation 16, and they gather them together to the place in Hebrew, called in Hebrew Armageddon. Now, Scott, I mean, you and I, we grew up as Dispies, fundamentalists, I think, both of us, and we were, dyed in the wool, dispensational, pre-trib rapture type of people. Sorry?
Dispensational, but not pre-trib.
Well,
which is weird. Which is weird, actually.
Okay. Well, in any event, what did you hear when you were growing up about Armageddon? What was the general consensus that you
I think the only thing I ever heard or read was it was the plains of Megiddo,
yeah.
And when I visited Israel 5 years ago, the I forget the name of the tell, but is it Mount Megiddo?
Tell Megiddo. Yeah.
So I remember looking out at that going, wow, yeah, this is where the armies are going to come in. So even though I was starting to see and understand that we're Israel yet, at that point in time when I went to Israel, I was looking out over the flat plains to go, kind of had the Napoleon that this is the perfect battlefield. So, so that was just, I don't think there was ever many alternative discussions about the location that I can remember reading about or hearing about. So.
Right. Yeah. Same here. I heard that it was going to be up there, and yeah, you heard that this is where a lot of battles took place. Right. But, the Hebrew, so what it says there in the Greek, right, it's called in Hebrew Armageddon. So that's the only word that we have that is coming from whatever the Hebrew was. All right. And so what has happened is people over the years have interpreted Armageddon as Har Megiddo. All right. The trouble, as you just pointed out, is there's a tell there, but there's not a mountain. All right. So for those that know some Hebrew, Har means mountain. Megiddo is, of course, a place known as the Megiddo Valley. But that should be a red flag for us right there. The Megiddo Valley. And there's no mountain of Megiddo. And, this is one of these things that it's all over Scripture. Scripture tells us it's going to take place in Jerusalem. And yet we still have in our very popular end times teachings that this battle of Armageddon is going to take place up in the Megiddo Valley. And it really just doesn't work out no matter how you slice it. So we thought we would take this episode and we would look at that. If you guys have questions, of course, put them in the chat. We'll do our best to get to them. So as our usual style, we're going to, have some slides and then we're going to have some discussion about this. So I'm going to start off with some slides just so that we can get some context for what we're looking at here. So Revelation 16:16, they're gathered in this place that is in Hebrew called Armageddon. All right. So this the traditional understanding. We're going to look at the linguistic understanding, the sheaves and the harvest motifs, and we're going to see that it's just outside Jerusalem. So the traditional understanding is that Har Megiddo is up in the plain of Jezreel, the Megiddo Valley. Now, I have here on the right, in the upper right hand corner, the Megiddo or a tell. Now, a tell, for those of you that don't know, a tell is a very, very ancient word. It actually comes to us from Akkadian, and it means a hill. And a tell is a very specific hill, mind you. It's a city that has been built, then destroyed, then rebuilt, then destroyed, rebuilt, destroyed, and you get the idea. That's what a tell is. All right. So you have this ancient place known as Tel Megiddo, and it's there to this day. So at the best, we can say that it's a little bit of a hill. It's hardly a mountain, but yet that is what the entire emphasis of Har Megiddo as the interpretation of that word would suggest is that we're actually looking at the mountain of Megiddo, and yet that's not at all what we see. So right there, that's where the supposed tell is. Of course, down below you can see there. That's it. That's the extent of it. Where's the mountain? All right. That's, I think, a fair question. Where's the mountain? Sort of like, where's the beef? Where's the mountain? I see a hill, but not a mountain. Now, in Hebrew, if the mountain of Megiddon is Har Megiddon, well, we've got some trouble. It just doesn't work out. First of all, we never have the term Har Megiddon in the Hebrew Bible. We have in Zechariah 12:11 in the plain of Megiddo, right? So there's no noon at the end of that. So that's something that's very significant. And it says, of course, in Revelation, we have Armageddon, excuse me, with a double dalet there. All right. So the majority text, which is the Byzantine manuscript family, and the oldest Alexandrus Vaticanus manuscript family has one delta and not two. So one D and not two Ds. Okay. Only in the Textus Receptus, which is, in my opinion, not a very reliable subset of a subset. Okay. There's only about 6 manuscripts in the Textus Receptus. They have the double delta. So it really should be spelled Armageddon with one D instead of 2 Ds. All right. So first of all, that's kind of significant because there are not 2 Ds in the actual Greek text. Now we have in the Hebrew Megiddon, right? This supposed Megiddon or Megiddo, there we do have double D. So there's been an interpretation, an assumption on a part of the people that have come up with this idea that it's Har Megiddon. That's an assumption. I suggest there's really a better way to understand it. All right, and I'm not the first guy to come up with this idea, but I took it and ran with it. I think it makes a lot more sense. All right, so Armageddon, instead of it being made up of 2 words, Har Megiddon, which we do not see evidence for in the text. We do not see that. I would suggest that we have a much better interpretation, Armageddon. All right, so in Arema, Boaz went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. That's an Arema. Okay, that's Ruth 3:7. Then we have the word gay. This is the word valley. All right, so we have 3 different words for valley in Hebrew. We have a bik'ah. This is what Megiddo is actually described as. The area of Megiddo is described as being a bik'ah. It's a valley, a wide, extended plain. All right, and then we have the emek. This is to be deep, a valley of wide extent fit for agriculture or warfare. And then we have a gay, which is a valley or low flat region. We all know one, right? Gay Ben Hinnom, right? The valley of the sons of Hinnom. This is a very narrow area, more like a canyon, if you will, right? It has a lot more in common with a canyon than it does the wide open valley where you can have lots of tractors and stuff growing. Okay, so we know that the Mount of Olives is going to be split in 2 from east to west, making a very large valley or gay. Now, I would suggest that Armageddon or Har Megiddon, excuse me, Armageddon, does not yet exist. It does not yet exist. It is going to exist the moment that Jesus puts his feet on the Mount of Olives and it splits in two. That is when it's going to come into being. And then we have the word din or don. This is where we have the word for judgment. It's identical with the word shaphat. Notice here in Joel 3:2, I will also gather all nations to the valley of Yehoshaphat, right? Where Yehovah judges. Let all the nations come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. All right. So how do we get don from din? Well, this is what we call an infinitive absolute that always has that O sound. So we have like words like mot, sov, gol, dom, right? Be silent, dom, in the Lord's presence. You are to weep in silence, dom. Hence, don is the infinitive absolute of the word judgment. So it's the valley of the judgment of the sheaves, basically. All right. So a harvested heap or sheaves, gay valley, don, judgment, valley of the sheaves, judgment, or the valley of the judgment of the sheaves. You can kind of put that in different ways and you get the same basic idea. All right. So Armageddon, I think it makes a lot more sense than the mountain of the valley or the mountain of Megiddo. All right, so let me just come back here, Scott, and if you have any thoughts, suggestions so far, I'd love to hear them. What are your thoughts on nothing?
I'm no Hebrew scholar, but
okay,
mine's more based on other passages, not really breaking down the Hebrew as you have done. More just I look at passages like Zechariah. The nations are gathered to to Jerusalem,
right?
And then when Sandra asked, "Is there going to be an actual war?" I don't think it's going to be much of a war. I think the nations, the beast kingdom, if you will, they're planning for a major battle or a major war.
Yeah, in their minds.
It doesn't actually happen.
Right. Yeah. In their minds. Well, so there's a few more passages that, in, like you said, Zechariah. I'll actually point those out here in my little presentation so that we can just keep on going. So, yeah, they're going to be fighting against Jerusalem. And it says, and I will make Jerusalem a cup of drunkenness to all the surrounding peoples when they lay siege against Judah and Jerusalem. And it shall happen in that day that I will make Jerusalem a very heavy stone for all peoples. All who would heave it away will surely be cut in pieces, though all nations of the earth are gathered against it. So where are they gathered? Not at Megiddo or Armageddon, as it were, but Armageddon is going to be in Jerusalem. Right? I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. There it is again. And then we have this reaping the harvest in the valley of Jehoshaphat. Let all the nations be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. Put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, go down, for the winepress is full. Prepare for war. Wake up the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near. Let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. Again, the valley where Yehovah judges. In Micah, now also many nations have gathered against you who say, let her be defiled, like speaking of Jerusalem. But they do not know the thoughts of the Lord, nor they understand his counsel. Well, he will gather them like sheaves to the threshing floor. So God actually has a trap. He's got a trap for Satan and for the beast. Now, this whole idea of reaping and the harvest and the sickle in Revelation 14:14. One like the Son of Man, in his hand a sharp sickle. Thrust in your sickle and reap, for the time has come for you to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. Thrust in your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And the winepress was trampled outside the city, and blood came out of the winepress up to the horse's bridle. So there's going to be definitely a war. Certainly Antichrist and his forces are going to lose. No question about that. Jesus won't take any casualties, but there will be intense fighting. There's no question about that. We see in Zechariah Behold, the day of the Lord is coming, and your spoil will be divided in your midst, for I will gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem. Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. Now, where is Jehoshaphat, the valley of Jehoshaphat? It's the Kidron Valley, and it's right next to Gehenna, which is interesting. So that we have there at the bottom, right? So Gehenna, the valley of Hinnom, and then over here is the Kidron Valley, all right? So we're kind of looking at it now from the side, looking across. There's the Kidron Valley. And this is really the same as the Battle of Gog and Magog, as it's often called. So Scott and I were discussing this just before we got started today. And Scott, when I was a pre-tribber, I always heard that Gog and Magog is going to be this war that's going to happen before the tribulation. I don't hold to that opinion anymore. I think that the so-called Gog and Magog war is exactly the same as the Battle of Armageddon. I mean, there's so many parallels. It's kind of mind-numbing to look at them all. We put them all in context.
A big one being, all will know. You see that, like Pharaoh in Egypt knew that Yah was the Lord, that Yah was Elohim. And there's a finality to this. In other words, there's not going to be any doubt. Whereas if it's 7 years before, there's still millions and billions being deceived. This beast entity, this thing, ruling the world, et cetera, et cetera. And there does seem to be a finality to Ezekiel 38 and 39.
Mm-hmm. So yeah,
that's sort of the way I look at it. Not that there might be some. I do believe there might be a war or some battles or nukes exchanged or something like that might trigger some end time events, but I don't think it would necessarily be the Ezekiel 38 or 39 battle until the end.
What do you mean by the end? Like, what do you?
Well, like the end of the age, like what we're discussing, Armageddon.
Okay. Yeah.
Words,
okay.
At the end of this age, when Yeshua returns, and pretty much, it's not much of a battle at that point in time.
So Revelation 20 does talk about how after the 1,000 years is Satan will be released, and then you have Gog and Magog, as it were, coming up. And there's going to be this battle. I think that's readily interpreted when we understand that Gog is the term for the god of death, which is Satan. And again, for those that don't know, I talk about that in Corrupting the Image Volume 2 and in Volume 3. I talk about who that entity is. In a nutshell, Satan, and Satan who then hybridizes with the Antichrist or the beast. So I wanted to go back and just kind of show some of the parallels, because this is one of these areas where I think that we can kind of make much ado about nothing, but when we start really comparing them, we see that, we're just talking about the same thing. And I think that's even more important, because God always likes to give a lot of references to important things so that we have multiple ways to verify something. So let's consider here that both Gog and Antichrist come in a time of peace and security. So I believe that Gog and the Antichrist are one and the same. Both Gog and Antichrist have the same coalition of nations, and many people are with them. Both Gog and Antichrist take spoil, loot, and plunder. Gog and Antichrist are destroyed at the end of the battle. In both the Gog, Magog, and Armageddon battles, the armies are confused and attack each other. Both Gog and Magog and Armageddon end with great earthquakes. Both Gog, Magog, and Armageddon experience great hailstones. They're both followed by the Feast of God. After both battles, weapons of war are destroyed. After both battles, God's name will no longer be profaned, because after both battles, Christ is physically present in Israel. And after both battles, God pours out his spirit upon Israel, and then he declares it's done. Okay. So there's a lot of stuff in there that is coming, right? And so we see in Ezekiel, Son of man, set your face toward Gog, the land of Magog, etc. And after many days, you'll be mustered in the latter years, Bachrita Ashanim, right? So at the end of the years, you will go against the land that is restored from war, the land whose people were gathered from many peoples, which I would argue is definitely talking about Israel. So I show what the meaning of Gog is. I won't go into all that, but basically it's Satan. I'm just giving you the really quick thing here. But enmity, so hostility and war is what this word Gog or Gog actually means. And, for me, this was mind-blowing once I finally put all these pieces together, because once I could see that, and I could see the linguistic evidence. For me, if there's not linguistic evidence, then I think we're just kind of throwing stuff out there and see what sticks against the wall. But the linguistic evidence, because here's a word. You have this word Gog, but where else does it appear? Nowhere. You don't have this anywhere other than in Sumerian literature of where this word comes from. I mean, people searched high and low, and nobody could figure it out. And I was just grateful that I was able to put 2 and 2 together. I was not the first guy to come up with this by any means, but it was kind of exciting to start looking at some of this stuff. So, we have that huge part of it. Again, I'm going a little bit quickly here because I don't want to take up the whole time with this. But again, once we put these things into the what I would suggest is their proper context, then we really have a place to understand how God is talking about this final battle. This is the big battle, the day of the Lord. And of course, he's going to talk about it in the prophets. Of course, he's going to talk about it in the book of Revelation. Jesus made reference to this same battle in Matthew chapter 24 and Mark 13 and other places, right? So they're all talking about this great day of the Lord, the big battle. And instead of it happening up in the north, it's going to be taking place in Jerusalem. And what I get excited about is that Jesus is not coming to destroy the Jewish people. Look, they're already going to suffer a lot. We know that 2/3 of the people in Jerusalem are going to be wiped out. That's tragic, right? But that's the forecast. I mean, that's what God has told us is going to happen. But they're going to finally cry out. And I would argue that it's going to take the leadership in Jerusalem to finally cry out. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, right? When they finally cry out, the ones who are representative of the Sanhedrin, they're representative of the people, the leadership back in Jesus' day, when he said, "You will not see my face again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." When they finally say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, then he's going to come back, and he's coming back with fury. He's going to come back. He's going to fight. And oh my goodness, it's going to be pretty wild when we put it all together. All right. So that's the quick version of my presentation. If people want to check out more, you can go check out Battle of Armageddon. I have a whole blow by blow in case you want to check it out. It's also in Corrupting the Image Volume 3. And it's coming in the book, which, again, I'm very, very excited about. So if you guys haven't gotten your copy yet of Regenesis Code, please go and get the pre-order on Kindle. So, Scott.
I have a question for you, really. Ezekiel 38 and 39 is intriguing to me, and we do have, obviously, a Gog, Magog war at the end. Do you see any, like in either 38 or 39, it possibly some of those passages being referred to the end of the seventh day or the end of the millennium? Because again, I understand now that prophecy is cyclical, and those two chapters they're not identical. I'll put it that way. Have you ever thought about that? That sort of it's one chapter. And I know there were no chapter breaks, but one could be referring maybe to the war at the end of this age, at the end of the sixth day, before the seventh day, and then the other one we do see it repeated in Revelation. I was just wondering your thoughts on that. I wouldn't be dogmatic either way, but
Right. Well, so what I would suggest is once we understand what Gog means and who it really is referring to, that it's referring to Satan. All right. And what I'm arguing is that Satan is going to hybridize himself with a human that we often call the beast or the Antichrist. He's going to hybridize with that individual. And so we're really talking about Satan, the god of death. Gog is the physical corporate embodiment, the incorporation, right, of Satan in the flesh, and he is the one who is going to fight against God ultimately. No surprise there, right? We know that he's been battling him, and so Gog will be his physical manifestation on the earth. So that Satan gets out, sure, right? Because there you go, Gog and Magog. Now, Magog is just a place. Okay, I know it rhymes, but it just happens to be a place. So, but Gog, and so this is what is commonly referred to as the Gog and Magog thing. So it's not going to be the identical battle, but it will be, like you said, kind of a repeat. It's going to be a rerun, if you will. I think probably rerun is maybe the best way to look at it. So yeah, they're two different battles at two different times, but they're both essentially happening in the same general locale, the area that we call Jerusalem. One will be against the earthly Jerusalem, and one will be against the heavenly Jerusalem. When they come out again and surround the beloved city, I think the beloved city is the New Jerusalem, right? So I'm happy to confess that I have a peculiar doctrine. I think I'm right, but I think that the New Jerusalem comes down at the beginning, and Satan and his cronies are going to try to storm the city to get one unrighteous foot across the threshold of the New Jerusalem. And it's not going to work out. Fire is going to descend from God because essentially the clock runs out. But you have more or less a repeat, and there won't be any weapons there, because we know that all weapons are going to be turned into plowshares, and there won't be any war anymore. So there won't be a true war. There will be an attack against the New Jerusalem. I'm talking after the 1,000 years. But there will be no war. No one's going to stand up to defend the city. They won't need to, because the clock is going to run out, and then Satan and his followers are going to just be consumed by God's fire at the end of all things. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's kind of
yeah,
how
I was just wondering if you saw any again, like certain passages where it's a city at peace, it's an unwalled city, and obviously right now Israel as a nation is armed to the teeth. I mean, yes, Israel doesn't have walls anymore like in ancient times when the city's main protection was its wall, but Israel, it's in the top 10 militarily. I mean, they're using weapons of defense and offensive weapons, obviously, recently here in the last week or two, quite a bit. So that's the passage that's always, as far as when we're doing now it'd be 2023 prophecy interpretation based on events as they exist right now. I think a good argument can be made that passage does not fit this time. Now, who knows what's going to happen in 3 years from now. If some of our dispensational brothers, and then again, I don't discount everything that dispensational prophecy teachers, scholars, etc., have postulated that there could be, a war, and then out of that war grows some type of false sense of security, where the world capital, if you will, is set up at Jerusalem. It is an international city. Then it's made a city for all religions, and that's Maria and I were talking about that recently, about how we believe Rome, the Pope, eventually moves to Jerusalem, if you will. It might set it up, and it would be, sort of, I guess, off limits at that point in time. But then I run into the problem that the nations are gathering against it at the end of the age. So it's
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I
well,
don't think that,
again, but
you
there's
know.
definitely it's a city at peace.
Yeah.
Uh, when this Gog comes against it, and right now Israel is not an unwalled nation, if you will, or unwalled city. It's got defenses. So
Hmm.
that's that's why I think some of these passages in that cyclical approach, in other
Hmm.
words, this could be an example of there being multiple fulfillments
Hmm.
uh, in Scripture, and some of these passages might not apply at all to the end of this age. It might just apply to what we see in Revelation. That's that's really more my understanding. In other words, with that cyclical approach, how prophecy repeats itself in different ages and different time periods. And so
Hmm.
that's sort of how I can now not even wrestle with that passage anymore. Oh, okay. Well, that very well could be referring to the future Gog Magog war at the very end of the seventh day or after that 1,000 years.
But
When,
you still see that there's going to be a battle before the
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
or let's say
again,
at the end of the tribulation, there's a Gog
yeah,
Magog war.
at the
That's going
very end, I believe again more so from Zechariah, but then this passage right here would just be a parallel passage. But
on.
Zechariah is this is a hard passage to probably to get a consensus on.
Mm,
Zechariah is not. I mean, at the beginning of his book, he uses all the symbols and I guess the apocalyptic language. But at the
mm,
very end, it's sort of just cut and dried. All the nations gather against Jerusalem, and so I don't see how that's really open for interpretation.
mm-hmm.
And so that's
Yeah.
why I would, and I can see that certainly Ezekiel 38 and 39 could also be referring to that period and what I'm sort of postulating, mulling over, and at the very end of the seventh day. In other words, sort of a
Hmm.
repeat, that cyclical approach to prophecy. And
Right.
obviously, even when Yeshua returns, it's not the end of prophecy. We know there's more yet to be fulfilled. So,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, let me just take a little bit more here because we have a question, where is Magog? So Ezekiel 38, son of man, set your face toward Gog, that's an individual, of the land of Magog, the chief Rosh, prince of Meshech and Tubal. All right, so some of these places, and I've highlighted some of these so that we can see them. So Persia, well, we know that's Iran. Kush, that is Ethiopia. Put, now this is where some people think that it's Libya. I would disagree with that. Um, this is, oh my gosh, now I'm totally spacing out.
Sudan, maybe
No, it's not the,
Ethiopia.
oh, this is gonna drive me nuts now. um, it's up by the Persian
Oh,
Gulf, where a lot of pirates come out of.
Qumran.
Oh, that's gonna drive me bananas.
Well, you've got Saudi, you've got Iran, you've got the United Arab Emirates, you've got
Right.
Qatar. You know, that's
Yeah. Well, so what is that hook? That horn that comes out
is it
on the.
Qumran?
Hold on. Oh, this is driving me
I,
cuckoo.
I,
Oh, there goes my my geography. That's pretty bad. Anyway, it'll come to me in a second. It's coming to me. Anyway, so it's not that important at the moment. But in any event, um, so we have these basic places. Gomer is somewhere in the area of Turkey, probably. So Meshech, I was actually looking on a map, and Somalia. Thank you, John Barney, and for J.R. Foster, and for William. Thank you, everybody, because I was totally spacing and I couldn't think of it. Somalia, yes, Somalia. All right, so Somalia is where you have a lot of pirates coming out of there, and Somalia is the area of Put. That was, I have it in the slide somewhere, where you have, a lot of ancient Egyptian evidence that was the area of Put. So I don't know how they got Libya out of that, but in any event, that's where it is. All right, so Somalia. So these general areas here, I found Meshech on a map where it's in Turkey. All right. So again, we're talking the general areas of Turkey. I want to say general because I'm not trying to be uber specific here, but that's the basic area that we're talking about. So I think that at least gives us some perspective as to where we're looking at, and let's compare this. Let's compare this with Genesis, the table of nations. The sons of Japhet were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech. All right, the sons of Gomer. Right? So we have Togarma. Then we have Tarshish. We know where Tarshish is. The sons of Yavan, that's the area of Greece. Okay, so then we have the sons of Ham, Cush, which is, of course, talking about Ethiopia. Then you've got Put and Canaan. All right, so we have a pretty good sense of where these are. What I would suggest is that it's not necessarily only talking about it's not only talking about just Turkey and that Turkey's now the bad guy, but I suggest that this is a description of a lot of different peoples, because back in the Table of Nations, these were the fathers of the nations that then spread out into different parts of the world. So what I would suggest is that this is basically talking about the many peoples that are going to come. And again, not only is it talking about the area of Turkey, but it's talking about the nations at large. That's basically what we're looking at here. So, all right. So we got that question. Very good. And a comment by Mark, he says, Armageddon is one of the 7 mountains of Jerusalem. Well, I'm not so sure about that. I just don't know how that is substantiated, Mark. I appreciate the comment, but I'm not really sure how that is anyway substantiated from the text. So another question, Scott, feel free to jump in here. This is from Ari. What do you guys think of Yeshua coming to Mount Sinai first before he comes to Jerusalem?
I don't necessarily have, I wouldn't say maybe a literal coming, but I see something happening maybe on a future Shavuot. Some type of prophecy being fulfilled that I wouldn't be able to put my finger on it right now, but I do believe there's going to be some major events, and I can see something happening maybe at Sinai. But again, I'm not dogmatic on this. Some people that teach that they can get dogmatic on a literal second Exodus. In other words, that there's going to be seas parting, clouds, manna from heaven. I'm not opposed to the idea. I just would not be dogmatic on it. I think we're all going to need to adjust our eschatology, not during those 30 minutes of heaven, but if we make it to the time when we see the abomination of desolation, I think we need to be very flexible to a certain, not on truth, not on the things that we know, but on our understanding. We need to be willing to admit we were incorrect and make some adjustments accordingly. Whether they're like some of our dogmatic brothers who believe in a literal second Exodus. Well, if there's no way provided by Yah for this second Exodus to happen, I can see a lot of people employing some self-help, if you will, trying to make arrangements to get to what they believe is a safe place, and it turns out not being a safe place. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I do see that these appointed times, and we do know that at Shavuot, I'm pretty sure that's when the law was given, and the 2 days that Israel was told to clean up their garments. There could be something major happen again. I mean, Yah came down then on the mountain, entered into covenant, and so I can see him appearing, and Doug and I both believe Yeshua is Yod He Vav He. So I could see something like that happening, but not the literal, if you will, second coming that we're speaking of at the end of the age. What
You
about
know,
you?
well, I really think the whole idea of the second Exodus, I think it's going to actually be far more literal than a lot of these people suggest. They're kind of like, we need to get out of, XYZ place and go into the wilderness for some interesting amount of time. The Exodus was all about one thing. It was about the Red Sea crossing. That was the Exodus, right? All of the stuff leading up to that was preparation. That was, let's get there. And you really can't talk about an Exodus until you have them, well, leaving the country. And how do they have to leave the country? Through the Red Sea. What I see happening in the end times is that when Jesus comes back, instead of parting the seas, he's gonna part the mountain, and you're gonna have there this valley of the judgment of the sheaves that is not yet created, but it's when he puts his feet on the Mount of Olives and it splits in two. That is when you now have a repeat of the Exodus. That is the second Exodus. And so then his people are going to flee through that mountain valley, it says there in Zechariah. They're going to flee through there, and then they're going to be saved. And then God himself, Jesus, Yeshua, is going to come, and he is going to fight on their behalf, right? So that's what I would suggest is the second Exodus. It's going to be epic. It's going to be mind-boggling. And guess what? Here's the thing, is that just as Pharaoh got lured into the sea, so too will the Antichrist, the beast, be lured into a trap. How do we see this? Well, let's take a look at it. It's actually quite cool when we start putting these pieces together. So in Zechariah 14, right, his feet are going to set on the Mount of Olives. It's going to split in two. And then something's going to happen here. It says, this shall be the plague which the Lord will strike all the people who fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall dissolve while they stand on their feet. Their eyes shall dissolve in their sockets. Their tongues shall dissolve in their mouths. And it shall come to pass in that day that a great panic from the Lord will be among them. Everyone will seize the hand of his neighbor and raise his hand against his neighbor's hand. All right, so they're going to fight against one another. Why are they going to fight against each other? Because God says that they don't know the plans of the Lord. He's going to lure them into this trap. He's even saying, come on, guys, come on down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I'm going to enter into judgment with you there, right? They're going to fall into this trap just like Pharaoh fell into the trap. He started thinking, oh, I can go through the Red Sea and I can go get those Israelites. And the Antichrist, the beast, is going to go through this mountain valley that just happened to open right in front of him. And the people he's trying to capture are now fleeing. He's going to go in there as well. They're going to be the bait. And then Jesus, who was up on top of the mountain, is going to then jump down and he's going to start kicking butt. And he says that his face is shining bright like the sun. He has rays of light coming out of his hands, according to Habakkuk chapter 3. And he's going to then start to slice and dice, and he's going to mess these guys up. I mean, that's just the only way to understand it, is he's going to seriously mess them up. And yet they think that they're going to be able to fight against him. But, bad idea. It's not going to work out as well as they think. So, I do think there could be a second Exodus, but I think the second Exodus is going to be when Jesus fights against those nations that are coming against him. and he's going to fight on behalf of his people. So let me just pull up another presentation. I have this idea spelled out in many different places, but I have some fun little graphics that can maybe help us to kind of put this together so that we can get a better sense of what this might look like when it all comes down. So let me pull this up for you guys. I'm just getting this ready so I can show it. And here we go. All right. Got it. Okay. There we go. All right. So so Armageddon, right? We got this battle that's coming. And all right. So here comes Yeshua. All right. So here we have the Valley of Jehoshaphat, and then he touches down in the Mount of Olives. All right. So again, here's the trap. Now many nations have gathered against you, saying, let her be defiled, and let her eye look upon Zion. Right? They don't realize all that's coming. All right, the nation is going to come against the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And we see all this stuff that is coming right before us. So here is on top of the Mount of Olives. So down below is the Valley of Jehoshaphat. Now we're in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, or the Kidron Valley, and it's going to be blood that's going to be in this general area. But again, the Valley of Armageddon, or the Armageddon, does not yet exist, but it will. Now also many nations have gathered against you, let her be defiled, but they do not know the thoughts of the Lord, nor do they understand his counsel, for he will gather them like sheaves to the threshing floor, right? So God is setting a trap for Satan and for the enemy, right? His winnowing fan is in his hand. He will thoroughly clean out his threshing floor, right? We keep seeing this same motif all over the place, and I love it, right? Because the enemy thinks he's going to destroy God's people. God's like, you're falling right into my trap. You just don't realize it. So here Yeshua comes to fight against these people. And again, I would suggest that in that day, you're going to have this remnant of people who live in Jerusalem, and they're like, "Uh-oh, we're in big trouble." But they know where he's coming. They're going to say Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, and then they're going to wait for him. They know where he's coming because it says very clearly he's going to come on the Mount of Olives. So they'll be down there, probably trying to maybe get to the top, but they're not going to make it. Yeshua comes to save the day, right? So here I got all these people together down there in the valley there, okay? And then here's Yeshua. In that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east, all right? And now it wasn't easy. I know it's kind of corny graphics, but that was the best I could do. All right. So the Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west, making a very large valley, a gay, which is a valley, a steep valley, a narrow gorge. And then you will flee through my mountain valley. That is the second Exodus when they're fleeing through there. Then you have the forces of Antichrist coming behind them. And then, right, this is the repeat. This is the Exodus right here. For Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, they are bewildered by the land. The wilderness has closed them in. You'll flee through my mountain valley. And then guess what? Here comes Yeshua. He's at the top of the mountain, right? He's at the top, and now he's going to come down, and he's going to defend his people. It says his brightness was like the light. He had rays flashing from his hand, and there his power was hidden. Before him went pestilence, and fever followed at his feet. All right, so then we're going to have this panic. There's going to be a great panic from the Lord among them. Everyone will seize the hand of his neighbor and raise his hand against his neighbor's hand, right? And he says, I will strike every horse with confusion and its rider with madness. I will open my eyes on the house of Judah, and I will strike every horse of the peoples with blindness. Why? Because they're looking at Yeshua, who is bright. His face is like the brightness, right? And then their flesh is going to dissolve while they stand on their feet, right? So this is the basic thing. And then Isaiah 63, why is your apparel red? Why are your garments like one who treads the winepress? I've trod in the winepress alone. right? So their blood is going to be upon his garments because he is coming to defend his people, not to destroy them. And then we have after that, because you got all these dead bodies, then the birds are going to come and they're going to eat the flesh of kings and captains. And of course, there's all these other passages in Ezekiel that I didn't talk about. And so then in Matthew 24, so also with the coming of the Son of Man be, wherever the carcass is, there the eagles, which can also be translated as vultures, the Greek word ethos, will be gathered together. All right, so the Antichrist gathers nations to destroy Israel. Jesus will rend the veil and he's going to come down. The governors of Judah are going to fend off attackers briefly. Jesus is going to touch down the Mount of Olives. It's going to split. Israel will flee through the mountain pass. Jesus, or Yeshua, fights the attackers. He gets bloodied, squashes them like grapes, quite literally. And then you got lots of bodies. Birds come and feast. And then you have the judgment of the sheep and the goats. It's going to follow that immediately. All right, so that I'm going to leave that for now. But that, I would suggest, is the basic scenario of Armageddon. All right, so just a thumbnail sketch there. You're muted.
So you have this happening, his feet touching down prior to Yom Kippurim, then, like because you
Yes.
said, okay. So during this 10-day period.
Yeah, I think anywhere from the time of the Feast of Trumpets. Now, again, I don't know if he comes on the day of trumpets or if that is when the leadership in Jerusalem finally says, oy vavoy, we need to call upon the king, and they're blowing trumpets, and maybe that is the day when their eyes are opened and they finally say Yeshua is the king, and then they call upon him. And then,
I personally believe that's when the Yeshua talks about they shall see the sign of the Son of Man. I believe that happens at the gathering, the zapture, if you will. In other words, when those who are not physically already, and again, I don't discount there being a literal migration to the land prior to that time, but the gathering is not only the four corners of the earth; it's the whole cosmos. His elect are gathered, the resurrection, if you will. So I'm definitely don't just look at it as a literal second Exodus where me and Doug and others watching this program might be on our own 3.5-year wilderness journey, because the woman is protected in the wilderness. And so I don't discount that happening, but I do believe whether we have been gathered to Israel at that time or not, then no matter where you are, if you're alive or if you're dead, you're going to get resurrected first. And if you're alive, that's when the ultimate gathering happens, is on that Feast of Trumpets. And I do believe that is,
I agree.
Yeah. And I believe that is when Judah will see the sign of the Son of Man and mourn. In other words, they will look to or upon him whom they pierced. And so I believe that, like you're saying, that's when all hope is lost. The nations are now, this final battle is about to take place. Nations are being gathered against Jerusalem. And I believe that's when they will call upon the name of the Lord. They will see that Yeshua is the Word made flesh. And they'll repent.
Yeah.
And in other words, it's I think a lot of times when we were born and raised on dispensationalism, which I never believed in a pre-trib rapture, but we looked at it from a standpoint of these seals come from the throne, the plagues. The entire purpose is not just for judgment. It is to get his people to repent. It is to get the people that are lost to repent and place their faith in him. So in other words, even after he has come, and even during this 10-day period between Feast of Trumpets and Day of Atonement, or the sheep and goats judgment, he is still calling and beckoning for people to repent. So
I love that, and that just underscores how our God is a God who
of
doesn't,
grace.
of grace. Yes, he does not delight in destroying anybody. I don't think he wants to destroy anybody. He wants us to turn. And really, the entire tribulation is a big opportunity for people to repent. Many will not, sadly. That is ultimately what he would like for us to do.
Well, I believe the
Mhm.
tribulation, it is the phlebo, the tribulated narrow path that produces the oil. It is that pressing of the olives that
Mm,
produces the oil. I believe the
mhm,
tribulation is for his people. In
mm,
other words, for them to refine this is like
hmm.
blasphemy to my dispensational brothers, but we're I'm sorry, brother, but you're not ready yet. Okay. You still follow Marcionist doctrine.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeshua's not coming back for a bride that doesn't believe what he said. And I believe that's the whole point of the tribulation, going back to Deuteronomy 4, when it says, in this time of distress, in the latter days, all of Israel will return to his way. And the fact that there are more and more seeing it every day. It's almost like the two witnesses, although we don't have those supernatural powers yet. But I believe that's what is happening right now. More and more of his people are returning to his way and his truth, and abandoning a lot of the things that we learned from Roman Christianity. That the reformers, thank God. I mean, thank God they recovered more truth, but they stopped reforming around the 4th century. And I think what we're seeing right now is a restoration to the original, and not the original, but the 1st century ecclesia as taught by the apostles, as taught by Yeshua, which nothing really changed. So,
Yeah, we're finally getting back to ground zero. That's how I
mhm.
like to look at it, and uh, this is something that I teach on frequently at the Way. Like, okay, we keep Sabbath, we eat clean. Good job, you're back to ground zero, right? That's all we've
Awesome.
accomplished. I
Yep.
remember
Baby steps.
when I was in Israel. I had a friend. He was rejoicing because he said, "Hey, my bank account is up to zero." So they didn't have really credit cards. They sort of had an overdraft. Actually overdraft. That's what they talk about. So their overdraft was our version of a credit card. And it always struck me just kind of funny that he's like, "Hey, my bank account is up to zero," and I'm like, "Oh, great," but that basically meant that my credit card's down to zero, right? And I was like, "Oh, but that's really what we're talking about, is that we've been in the hole for quite a while, for many centuries, and now that we've sort of dug ourselves out to zero, now we're like, wow, that's just so amazing," and it is. But on the other hand, that's where the disciples were starting from, and so we don't want to just get back to zero. We want to get there and then keep on building to where the disciples were. Like, that's ultimately the goal.
And ultimately, yeah, that's the Great Commission, to
Hmm.
make disciples. In other words, Yeshua discipled them.
Hmm.
They were to go out and make disciples.
Right.
Uh, not conversions. I mean, obviously, you have to preach the initial gospel. There certainly is a place for evangelism and things of that nature, but really, our commission is to make disciples, not converts.
Mm,
Not get them to say a prayer. We're supposed
mm,
to walk as
mm,
he walked. But I saw one question up here, Doug.
hmm.
Is talking about
Mm.
Michael Heiser, that the late Lamon Kaman. I'm probably butchering the name, but that Heiser thinks it's all spiritual, and I would disagree, Brother Heiser. Doug and I have had this conversation. He hated both eschatological systems. He hated the we're already fully in the kingdom. That would be Roman Catholicism and some of the Reformed churches that teach that we're already in the kingdom. The kingdom is now, and he saw that no, it's not quite yet. And he also despised dispensationalism, which taught that no, everything is yet future. This is not even, the kingdom is not even close to now. And I was hoping, obviously he's passed away now, but I was just hoping he could put the two together with this, with how we're grafted into Israel. Like, yes, the
Hmm.
kingdom has been restored.
Hmm.
100% the kingdom has been restored. we just don't have the king reigning on the throne on earth right now.
Right.
We don't have
Yeah.
perfect rule and righteousness and justice and the Torah going forth from Jerusalem to the nations yet. So the kingdom
Yeah.
is now, but not yet. All of Doug is in Colorado. I'm in Alabama. Most of the people watching this program are everywhere else in the world other than Israel. When the kingdom is fully restored, we will be gathered back to the land. That one of the reasons our Jewish brothers reject Yeshua as Messiah is because Peter asked, "Is it now that you're going to restore the kingdom to Israel?" Well, Doug and I now understand that means the gathering of the tribes back to the land. In other words, and literally the Davidic kingdom, but with Yeshua, Messiah, on the throne. That hasn't happened yet. And so our dispensational brothers are correct in that. They just can't see that they're going to be part of that gathering.
Right.
I think they get raptured out of here 7 years before.
I like to liken it to Jesus did all the paperwork at the cross, so everything was satisfied legally. And I'm sure you might appreciate that, Scott, as a lawyer, right? That all the legal paperwork has been done, but we do not have a full manifestation, a full possession of the inheritance yet, right? So, all the paperwork is there, it's yours, but the time hasn't quite yet come for us to fully enjoy it.
Chris Steinley's accounting metaphor is also apropos here. In other words, it is recognized. It's on the books. It's the promise is on the books. The guarantee is on the books. We just haven't fully realized it yet. The money has not come all the way in. It's like in your account. You're going to get it.
Yeah.
But you can't put your fingers on it. You can't put your physical. So in that respect, Doug and I do agree with Heiser. This is sort of the spiritual aspect of the kingdom, but we also see and understand that we are now full-blown, by golly, flesh and blood citizens of Israel. We're just living in exile. Yeah. We're like the Israelites in Egypt. We're not in the land yet. We don't have all the promises yet.
Yeah.
And Heiser was so close. He hated both systems, but he never, he's like, they both have truth, but he never put them together.
Yeah. Sometimes I put money in the bank and it says, here's how much I have that I actually have, and here's how much I have available. Right. And so there's always that discrepancy. Like there's the money I have that's there, like you said, on the books, but it's not yet available for me to actually spend it. And so that's the basic idea here, is that all the promises are on the books, but some of them are not yet available. So that's basically where we are. And, we're out of time here, but the bottom line is walk humbly. None of us has it all figured out. Dr. Heiser had a lot of great things, a lot of wonderful insights. And I'm grateful for all that he taught, even sometimes when I maybe disagreed with him or I did agree with him. But you know what? Hey, I don't agree with myself sometimes from, 5-10 years ago. I'm like, and I'm sure, 5-10 years in the future, I'll be like, what did I know? So, let's keep looking forward to the return of Yeshua. It is going to be epic, though. I know that when he comes back, it's going to be epic. And that is in the Regenesis Code books. So make sure to get your copy because it's coming. I'm just so excited about it. Again, you can go to Amazon.com and look up Regenesis Code. This is coming. So it's coming out July 5th. Really excited. Also, if you've never been to Israel, you should go. It's going to be a life-changing trip for you. So go to thewaycongregation.com and you can get all the information on the button that says Israel trip. So check that out. And if you want to be a patron, just go to patreon.com/Doug Hamp. Thank you guys. So glad that you joined us.